All right. Hello, this is that girl Ari, and today I wanted to do a Rants and Rambles video. So just to get it out of the way, this is me. This is my voice, and I want to take you guys through this video and explain some of my personal experiences with mental health and mental disorders. The reason that I would like to do this is just on the basis of I've been seeing a reoccurring issue as of late. It's one that breaks my heart, but also enrages me. It's something that I've actually been saying for years. I was just too scared to come out and say something about it and share my personal experiences because I thought everybody would just see me as some edgelord or some freak and that they wouldn't take any of these issues seriously. And so the issues that I am noticing over the last couple years is people faking mental disorders for attention or faking mental disorders and then making it their whole personality. And while it breaks my heart that they feel like they have to fake these mental disorders at all, it also enrages me that some people will take small symptoms, not look or research at a whole broadened spectrum of symptoms that pertains to one singular disorder, and then will continue to make it their entire personality. So, today I'd like to go through some of my diagnoses that I have gone through over the years from ages 6 to 7-ish to 17. I've not been recently diagnosed with anything, but I am actually in the works of finalizing a diagnosis. So, let's go ahead and jump right into this, and let me share some of my nitty-gritty negative experiences through these disorders so that I can break the barrier and break this red tinted film or rose gold tinted film of, oh, it's quirky to have these disorders. Because it's not. It's debilitating. It's painful, it's heartbreaking, and people with some of these disorders don't even make it past the age of 30 statistically. So let's jump right into this. I have my notes, and let's go. So all of my diagnoses as of right now started off whenever I was around 6 or 7 years old. I can't remember much from my childhood, and you'll see why from a more recent diagnosis, one that came much later on in the years. But let's go ahead and start off with ADHD, OCD, clinical depression, and anxiety. I was diagnosed with all of these at the young age of 6 to 7. And I believe that the reason for this was because I lived in a very shitty situation. I couldn't control those things, and while my personality and while my life, and while I was trying to figure myself out, I didn't have any structure. I was physically and mentally abused, and due to that, my brain kind of warped. It became a bit different than others, and due to that, I started experiencing the symptoms of all of those disorders. We go on to the defiancy disorders. I was diagnosed with multiple, so I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of which ones specifically, but I was diagnosed with them at 12 to 14 because of the behavioral issues I was having that were much less mature and also much more mature than my age range, where I would be able to intelligently explain why I didn't want to do something. But at the same time, other days, I would completely break down as if I were a 5-year-old not getting candy from a store. The only problem is I was never taught the distinguishments between needs and wants. And so if I felt that I needed something, it was absolute survival, because back at that old shitty trailer, everything was survival of the fittest. And if I didn't get what I want, the only way that my parents would react is through tantrums. That was normalized for me. And so as a 14-year-old teenager, I would throw a tantrum like an 8-year-old girl, trying to desperately call out for help. And whenever you are not able to distinguish your mental needs, your psychological needs, your moral needs, your social needs, and your physical needs, everything becomes a need. And if you don't get it, then you feel like you're dying, even if you're not. even if it's completely harmless to not have this thing. So next is the PTSD. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the details of the traumatic event, but let's just say it's something that a 12-year-old should never have to experience in their life. Putting their life on the line to save children younger than them is something they should have never had to do, something I should have never had to do. And due to that, it completely destroyed my mental ability to function, to smile, to look at anything in a positive light. This was the year 12 was the year that I entered middle school. This is also the year that I started to SH, and I started to have ideations. And so that was definitely a big breaking point for my psyche, having to do something like that, having to go through that trauma, and then basically getting no follow-up therapy besides, how are you feeling today? There was no reconstruction, there was no support, and while I did have a therapist, I can say that we did not have a good fit. And lots of the time, she didn't know exactly what I needed, even though I would verbally express it. So then, at the same time, about a couple months later, at age 12, I was diagnosed with insomnia. I couldn't sleep for days on end, and I was so wired that all I would do is sit in my bed, watch my phone or my laptop, talk to people I shouldn't be talking, and with no boundaries, just be wild into the night while sitting in my own room. If you don't know, if you don't sleep for long periods of time, then the neurons in your brain can start to shut down because it's not getting that well-needed reconstruction that you get during sleep. So my cognitive functions started to fail. I started getting worse at math. I started getting worse at social studies. I started getting worse at English, and that was always my favorite. I would never be able to function in these classes, and they would take it as some form of defiancy, whereas really I was just struggling to get a basic need once again. Finally, I take a pretty long break through my diagnosi, and we finally reach age 17 whenever I had to be inpatiented for reoccurring SH and SU ideations. After this, I was inpatiented for 7.5 months, and through that inpatienting, I was diagnosed with something that would potentially change my life and teach me a whole new course of action of where to go from here and how to start healing. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. It is much different from bipolar. It does have similar symptoms in some cases, but it is a whole widened perspective. And this is one that is very niche. Not a lot of people have information on borderline personality disorder, and I oftentimes confuse the two and would misdiagnose myself, even with a proper diagnosis on paper, through my symptoms with bipolar, because there are similar symptoms, but it's completely different in structure, and it affects your psyche in a completely different way. Some symptoms that have been recognized by multiple professionals for potential diagnosis is symptoms of dyslexia. You may have noticed throughout this video that I do have a slight speech impediment. I have to truly enunciate my words so that I don't sit here and stutter and fall over them. Some things that they've noticed that are just baseline symptoms for dyslexia, as well as some deeper things that I'm not going to go into in this video, are whenever I read, I take an extremely long time because I can read a whole sentence and not process it at all. And then I'll read it 4 or 5 more times and still not be able to process it. And the other large symptom that they've noticed is how I verbalize some words or some sentences. Let's say that I was trying to read out the sentence, "The sky is blue." Instead, I would read out, "Is the blue sky," or "the bluest sky," or "the is blue sky." I jumble up my words, they mix around in my head, and then they come out completely backwards sometimes. And it's just due to the over-processing of the words, the inability to process while over-processing. That goes over all of my diagnosi, and now I just want to go over some of the debilitating things that these symptoms of which I've been diagnosed with have brought me. The debilitating behaviors that I experience the debilitating cognitive functions, the failure to communicate, the failure to have social skills, to have a life, so that I can truly explain to you why no mental health disorder is a joke. Will we sit here and look at the flu or some other physical disorder like brain damage, and will we look at it and say, oh, it's so quirky to have brain damage? We would not. And mental health disorders can be just as debilitating. So let me go through these and give you some of the symptoms that I've experienced that have debilitated my life. So we have ADHD. And it's two ends of the spectrum for me. It's either you are hyper focusing in on every little detail until you get overwhelmed, the sensory issues, all of that, or the inability to focus at all, the dissociation, the inability to comprehend what is being told to you. Even if it should be simple as put the cup on the fridge. And I've had to deal with that since the age of 6 and 7, and I do have worse waves than others. I'd say right now it's been pretty good. I do hyper-focus in on subjects that aren't necessary, and I do have reactions that are completely inappropriate in some cases, especially sad situations. Let's see here. The next is OCD. OCD is so incredibly debilitating because it involves paranoia. It involves the innate need for a specific type of organization. It involves the innate need to have these specific thoughts, or else bad things will happen. And I know that sounds very stereotypical of OCD, but those are one of my main symptoms. I have to do specific things, or someone in my family will get hurt. I have to call my brother, make sure the kids are okay, because I had a bad dream, and that must mean something bad. I have to have the pencils in my drawer in a specific color, or else it will drive me to a point of pulling at my hair and crying. So next is clinical depression and anxiety. With these two, I'm pretty sure mostly everybody knows the baseline symptoms by now. An overwhelming feeling of sadness that just can't be ridden of. Or with anxiety, the feeling of fear whenever in a crowd, or whenever you're overwhelmed, or whenever you're too stressed, and then suddenly you can't function. It was no longer just an overwhelming feeling of sadness. It was 6 to 7 year old me wanting to run away every day, wanting to get away from the life that I have because I was not getting my needs met. I did not want to be on this planet with everybody else. I wanted to be somewhere else where the world was better, where the next world was more beautiful, more colorful, and wouldn't hurt me in the way that it had. With my anxiety, I didn't want to go to school for fear of being bullied, even if it wouldn't happen. I didn't want to go out to my grandparents because I was scared they were going to say mean things about me. I was scared everybody was always talking behind my back, and I was scared that I wasn't going to be good enough. I looked at my older brother and I said, wow, he's already got a job, and I know he's 8 years older than me, but he's already got a job and he's so successful, and the only thing he's bad at is math. And I'm bad at everything. And I'll never be enough. That's what 6-year-old Ari thought on a daily basis. And it was debilitating. Next were the defiancy disorders, and this has very interesting symptoms and the fact that of how it debilitated my life. My defiancy disorders, in part, is what I feel like destroyed my relationship with my parents, because they didn't understand what was going on. They didn't even know what a defiancy disorder was. I even had to remind them multiple times that this was a diagnosis and these symptoms are real and they're valid. But at the same time, I didn't know how to deal with them because I was being defiant. My social skills were completely destroyed, and I couldn't have friends properly. I would always stab them in the back in fear of they're gonna do it first. And I would outright just holler and scream and deny all of society's social skills that are necessary in schools. I would physically harm myself as a 12-year-old girl in a middle school classroom just so that I could grab the attention of the teacher, so that I could pull away from the teaching and focus on me. And what I mean by that is I would oftentimes slam my head into the wall or pull on my hair until there was chunks of hair on my table, just waiting for my teacher to pay attention, to see it. 7 years I've had to deal with this debilitating disorder, this debilitating symptoms, everything that accompanies PTSD. For the longest time, within the last couple months, it's gotten a lot better, but I couldn't be in the same room as a firearm. I couldn't trust myself to make the right decision because sure, I made it right the last time, but what if I don't this time? And what if someone gets incredibly hurt? It's the constant flinching, the sharp inhales, the sudden panicky feeling that comes out of nowhere, even though you're feeling just fine. I am going to be going to an appointment very soon where I get an EKG on my heart to learn if I have been physically straining my heart for so long that it has permanent damage. And it's because of these debilitating thoughts, these debilitating physical feelings that I don't know how to control. And so finally, we come to borderline personality disorder. I was diagnosed last year, but they seem to believe that I developed it at a very, very young age. And I was just being misdiagnosed, but it is also in paperwork, so I wanted to go through my diagnosis throughout the years. Because most of my symptoms correlate more with borderline personality disorder, because while I do have a lot of the symptoms of the other ones, I only have a few versus the whole spectrum that would perfectly diagnose me with these items. I still try to cope with them, and I personally like to keep the labels just because that teaches me, okay, if I were to have the label of OCD, what are these coping skills? What can I do for this? What can I do for that? How can I benefit myself through these symptoms and these results of these coping skills? So with borderline personality disorder, it is the overwhelming mood swings, the mania, the crashing, the inability to verbalize how you're feeling because you don't even know yourself. The feeling of not being in the middle, but being split on two hyper horrible ends at the same time. So instead of being here, a lot of the time I am here on overly positive, overly excited, overly hyper fixated on every little thing, and then overly overwhelmed, overly anxious, overly upset on a constant basis, always clashing with each other. And it's just as rough. Sometimes these manic episodes where I'm on both ends of the spectrum, or one or the other, can last for months at a time, and during that time, I can barely function. It's like just recently, last night, I sat here and cleaned my room for 5 hours. Threw away 5 garbage bags of clothes that no longer fit me, that had stains, that had holes, just years and years of hoarding. All in my closet, all in my drawers, all over my room, under my bed, everything. And then I had another bag of which I'm gonna donate. And then I had 2 more full of trash that I had just tucked away in the hopes of, hey, I'll see this again and it'll remind me of this good memory. But it's not just that. It's also the hyper paranoia that someone's talking about you and you're not gonna know how to react, and your temper's gonna get the best of you, and you're gonna hurt people that you love. And it's also, with a more niche symptom, it is the shadow people. It is the hallucinations, it's the hearing things that aren't there, it's the seeing things that aren't there, smelling something, tasting something that you never put in your mouth. I am gonna go ahead and go. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this video. Make sure to grab yourself a snack and some water and enjoy your day, do something productive, but don't force yourself. Don't feel like you have to meet up to anybody else's expectations, because you don't. You're fine just the way you are. And if you don't feel like you're fine just the way you are, then you work those healthy habits. You set healthy goals to benefit your life. But don't do it for anybody else but yourself. I hope you guys had a lovely time watching this video. I know I sound quite dramatic. If you liked the video, please subscribe. And with that, you guys have yourselves an awesome day. Bye.